Hi, friends. Welcome to Take Part. This is the podcast where we talk about reaching out and joining in to better your life, experience deeper connection, and achieve your goals. Before we dive in, I wanted to remind you that this is a new podcast, so anything that you can do to support is really, really helpful. Please subscribe on YouTube. You can follow along on any of the podcast platforms, or you can subscribe at takepart.substack.com if you want to get notified every time there's a new episode. All right. Let's dive in. I'm joined by Aimee Schlosser today. Hi, Aimee.
Hey,
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
sure. My name is Aimee Schlosser. I'm a Seattleite turned San Diegan. I'm a mother of two and a military spouse. And I have never lived in anywhere except for Washington, except for these last 3 years. And it was a pandemic pivot decision to change life careers. And so I'm on a new path and I love to sail and travel and cook and be in communities with others.
I love it. Thank you. So we met a few years ago. And at that time, I feel like you were just at the very beginning of your transition to moving to San Diego, kind of getting into a new vibe there, starting a new life. Tell us a little bit about that time and the transition that you were going through.
Sure. So we moved in, a couple years ago, and everything was so new, as well as becoming a military spouse alongside multi-state move across state lines. And I think a big part of the early days were just trying to catch my breath. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time, and starting over completely in every aspect of life was, like many, daunting, but there was not a lot of obligation and there was a lot of freedom in time. I was able to have, I think, my foot in both worlds for a little bit. I think some
Mm.
people do that with their maybe home city and a new city. Like I found myself going back every couple months. So it was able to scratch those itches around connection or time with known folks or your favorite restaurant or whatever it might be. Then there's something about turning the page of a year and then starting in 23, going through the seasons for the first time, which was definitely a shock in a good way from being a Seattleite born and raised to having vitamin D during the winters. I think probably about 9 months in was when it became evident that there was, and it was the first deployment that we went through as a family. So we don't live on a base, we live in the community. How do we know people? How do we learn the language of a complex organization like the Navy? And
Mm.
I really felt like I needed to step out of my comfort zone to say, I need to meet people, I need to do something differently. I've got to rewrite the way in which I navigate the world because I was able to rely on relationships from childhood to college to working in person. And I was fully working remote during this time and needed in person relationships to make it work during this transition and season.
Yeah. That's so interesting. You were able to say, okay, not 100% ready to be completely, sure-footed in this new place. So kind of having that 6 months of like transition, was that comforting or did it feel like it was delaying your feeling solid in the new
It's
place?
a good question. I would think it was probably a little bit of both. And I wonder if others feel the same, which is there's comfort in the old, and then you're not quite ready to let it go. And you're also not quite sure how to start with the new when you're building muscle memory for the basic routines of where you go grocery shopping. What's your favorite
Mm.
coffee shop? So, yeah, I think the comfort of the old and then the desire for the new, there's probably a bit of that tipping point. And for me, it was deployment and being down here without family, thinking, what am I going to do for 6 months to maintain sanity and connection?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. What are sort of the logistics of deployment that affected you? Like does deployment essentially means like your husband's going to be gone for this whole time, so you're now figuring out how to manage your family obligations, figure out all of your routines, that kind of stuff? Is like what did that time feel like?
Yes, it was a shock. I don't think it's one of those things where you have an idea of how it might go, but you really have no clue.
Mm,
And it's everything. And depending on where they're at or the satellite capabilities or whether or not they're in port, you may also not be speaking with your partner during that time.
mm,
The first 6 weeks are the hardest, and the last 6 weeks are the hardest because
mm,
you're getting in your new routine and it's a shock, and you really know that you don't have someone there to come in and give you a break, or you've got to put together the systems for breaks. And then the
mm,
last 6 weeks, depending on how long they've been gone, is when everything falls apart and you've got just enough energy to get to the finish line, but then inevitably something goes a little haywire. Like it's must be some sort of rule that if like funny stuff happens, unexpected things. The other thing is, unless they are flying home, if they're taking the boat home, it really depends on, is the boat going to make it? That date that you thought was going to be, what, something broke and they're somewhere getting apart, and then you're just desperately counting down the days and then the dates change. And even though and I don't think I mentioned in the intro, an organizational change manager, even though that's my career, the personal change and the expectations and managing my own resistance or change curve takes practice every single time I have to do it. When there's frustration and anger, you're like, you said you would be home. But it's out of
yeah.
your hands. That's the thing that's been the biggest mindset shift, is how
Yeah.
when you are in service as a service member or family, you don't get to dictate the rules of engagement.
Mhm. Yeah. That sounds very hard. And I say that all the time. Like, I'm a change manager too, and this is one of my specialties, and it's really, really hard to do that for yourself sometimes. Okay, so during this time, I was going to ask you, what are some of the things that you've tried, which I think is where we want to go next. But I'm also acknowledging that if you tried anything, that's pretty spectacular because you're also sort of on your own with this family, trying to figure out how to do it by yourself. So, what kinds of things did you try, and how did you balance that with all of the things that you were trying to get done and just be responsible for in your life?
That's a great question. And one of the questions I think you'd asked was, are you a natural extrovert or you're more an introvert? And I would say I'm in the middle, but I'm a daughter
Mm.
of an extrovert. And
Ah,
my family love to gather. So being social, being connected, and my grandmother, who was a part of a community, and acts of service and volunteering were really big and ingrained in my childhood through her example and in practice. That while I might not be the most extroverted person, I crave connection and community and will give myself a little push because I see the payoff.
yeah.
And so, a couple things that I did, I found out about a spouse community that was a social club for surface warfare officers that my husband's, that's his job. And they were having meetups. So I showed up by myself the weekend after he deployed, didn't know anybody. It was at a movie night and was really worried I wasn't going to find the people. And then the movie was going to start. And so I asked around a little and then found them, and they were so kind and so caring. And while I have like lifelong friends and people that know me deeply, there's something about the commonality of being a military spouse. There's not a lot of explanation that's needed, which is trickier for my friends in this season of life to support because they don't really get it. And I totally understand. I wouldn't either. So they just wrapped me up. And then they also said, we're looking for board members for the next
Mm.
year. Would you like to be involved? And I said, as somebody who appreciates accountability and likes to put my money where my mouth is, right? Like I said, you know what? Yes. And I became the membership officer.
Wow.
And we'd meet virtually. They needed a new website. And so I played with Square and set that up. And I also felt like I was in a position to maybe improve outreach or help continue to foster engagement. Because as you really think about people coming back post-pandemic, like 2023 was still relatively early for some people to have the push to come back to things. Not that they were worried as much, I believe, about exposure, but more the muscle memory wasn't there.
Yes.
And so we were looking for ways to engage, and there would be more traditional meetups like somebody hosted and holiday gift exchange or a welcome gathering. And some folks, especially since there's hierarchy in the military, which is also very interesting, it's a really kind gesture for those that have partners of a higher rank to be welcoming and including members of the community. They'd be hosting in Coronado and these places, and you just think, this is where Top Gun was filmed, just down the street. And that was a success, I would say. I was on the board for 2 years and I met some wonderful people. I had lunch with one the other day, and I really connected with a few of those women. And there was also, of course, men that were spouses too. So it was a really great group. And I think I especially connected with people that were juggling work and or careers and kids. And I needed somebody to ask acronym questions too, or what does this mean? Or how would you do this? Because there's a lot to know. And I just felt like I was starting over completely
Yeah.
overnight in this new world without a blueprint.
There's so much I want to dig in on that. How did you find the military spouse group? Do you remember?
So, how I found the Navy spouse community was actually very random. I also joined a community online by Dr. Becky Kennedy called Good Inside, which is parenting resources and support. Because as you can imagine, a primary parent is pushed to the nth of their abilities and is always very illuminating the opportunities you have for healing and self-care. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
And so I joined that also around that same time because I needed some more strategies and tools. And it was a small community at the time. So when I joined, Dr. Becky welcomed me and said, there's a woman that is also from the armed forces. Maybe you two would want to connect. And her husband was Air Force. They were stationed in Germany. And she said, have you looked into any of the spouse groups? And I said, I don't know where to start. There's spouse groups. And she sent me a couple Facebook links because that's where primarily they operate. And
Yeah.
I found the group that I joined because she sent me a Facebook group link from Germany
Nice.
and I showed up. And I'm so grateful because I really didn't know where to start. But what a random way to find in-person gatherings from somebody not even living in the States. So I'm forever
Right.
grateful for her and also this really cool parenting community that was like, hey, I bet you could use a friendly face. Oh,
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it just speaks to the value of reaching out to be involved in whatever, because being involved in one thing might lead to being involved in another thing, and you might find maybe you don't immediately find your people, but you find them elsewhere. Like I love that. I love how sort of connected the things that you're doing are.
I think that's exactly right, Emily. I feel like we're planting seeds or following breadcrumbs. We don't
Yeah.
necessarily know where they're going to end up, but we're like trusting in the process. And that
Mm.
next person or that handoff to that person is where you needed to go. So maybe that original thought didn't show up the way you wanted, but then you got to ultimately where you needed to go. And I feel like that hits on the power of good intention and putting that energy out into the universe and knowing it's going to come back to you, but without the expectation of how.
Mm. Yeah. I think there's something too so powerful in what you were saying before about pushing yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable, right? I think that there's this thing where you could go and you could try to, okay, I'm going to reach out, I'm going to go to this group meeting. And then suddenly you're like, I didn't relate to anyone at that group meeting and I didn't really enjoy it. And then suddenly you're just discouraged from doing anything. And I think that it's really important to say, okay, maybe I'm going to try one more time. It sounds like that's played a big-ish role in what you've been doing. And what does it look like for you to kind of put yourself in that discomfort? And it doesn't sound like you're not torturing yourself, but there is a little bit of just like, I have to step out of the comfort zone, right?
Totally. And you get to hear the success stories, like, and behind the scenes, that general
Yes.
discomfort or when something doesn't work, it's you're doing a little soul searching. And there's a bit of a, how am I showing up? Am I putting myself out there the way that I'm hoping to? Is it just not resonating? And I think it could sometimes, if you're looking at it through the lens of maybe it's not quite working, what's going on with me versus, you know what, I'm going to keep trying. I just haven't found my people yet, but they're out there. And I think discomfort is a muscle. And I believe the more we do small things like that, the more we can do bold things or with a little bit of those successes that you'll be brave enough to continue to try. But it is discouraging. I did have some soul searching conversations with my partner when he was home.
Mm.
Nothing's working. You know, what's going on? Okay, you know what? I'm going to take a beat and take care of myself, refocus, and protect some of my energy. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to put myself out there again. And I definitely had those conversations.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that you did have those. I think that's really important for people to understand, because the people that are sort of, okay, I tried over here. Oh, that didn't work. I'm just going to go somewhere else. Those people don't need help, probably like reaching out to people. They don't need the reminder that it's really good to put yourself out there. But I think that continuing to try, and your point about taking some rest, doing some self care, like taking a beat and not just like beating yourself up for it and then trying again is really, really important, right? If you're not a full extrovert, this stuff does take rest to kind of know where to go next.
Totally. And it's perspective taking, and you don't always get that in the moment. And so if you
Yeah.
see it as a way to engage in life, then you can continue to muster that energy when you have it. If you feel like it's important and the discomfort is worth it, and you see the ways in which you can grow from it and how much richer your life can be, because if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't have had the community to rely on that I have today. And while it might not be massive, all it really takes is a couple key connections
Mm.
to help
Yeah.
make it feel more doable.
Yeah. And time and patience, it sounds like too, right? I've definitely experienced like, okay, I'm getting to know this new community or I'm getting to know this new person. And then 2 weeks go by and you're like, oh no, have I lost it? Like, is it, is it gone? And just like the patience to keep going, have scheduled activities, that kind of stuff. It sounds like that's been important.
Definitely. I think what you're describing is showing up or putting yourself in the ability to be visible. You've got to get yourself out there in order to get the paybacks or buy off or whatever it is. I would show up to some things and maybe I wasn't having the best day, and I don't want folks to push themselves because there's that fine line.
Yeah.
But I think it convinces yourself that you're still doing it. It's like a mindset. You're like, I'm going to show up and whatever happens.
Yeah.
So
I know that you work remotely, and I know you've also said that at least one of these groups meets remote. Do you find that you get your cup filled through a remote connection? Is that a part of how you've connected with folks, or do you really try to seek out in-person connection?
that's a great question. I feel like it's a little bit of both. I feel lucky enough to work with some incredible people, especially closely, that really fill my cup with inspiration and energy and thought partnership. And so that works pretty well. And as that ambivert, having some time at home to do some thinking or some heads down work, I do miss the social aspects of in person, but this season of life, I feel really grateful to be remote. The balance of some in person time with the surface warfare officer spouse group or those gatherings at a friend's house during deployment. But I also found a company was doing dance church, and that was once a month, and it was just any ability, any age, any background, you could come dance. And so that was really nice for some like collective energy and shaking out the cobwebs and
Yeah.
the stuck feelings. And I always feel like having some somatic opportunities helps get out of my head and into my body. So I love dance or group fitness where I can pick up on that energy of others and give it back. So that's another thing that I do to kind of balance the remote work that seems to help quite a bit.
We've talked a couple of times on this podcast now about the sort of mix between community and exercise and like moving your body together. So I think there is something really powerful in that, right? Getting yourself to move together. I think there's something to that for sure.
Most definitely. And there's accountability and there's also joy, because when you can
Mm.
do some big movements, as somebody that has always found joy in movement, there's something about the collective energy that brings it up a couple notches versus, I could do a dance party if I need to with some music to shake it off. But there's something about being in with music alongside. The combination of the two definitely makes that humanness that at a certain level or cellular level we're here together in our human bodies just acting out and being silly and having fun, and I love that. I love that feeling.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I want to do that right now.
Me too.
So I think my last question is you've already given people so many great tips, I think, on how to get out there and how to find these groups. But if you were talking to someone who is having trouble or not sure how to get out there or navigating a life transition like you did, what kind of advice might you give them?
Oh gosh, I would say that there's going to be some discomfort, there's going to be some missteps or missed opportunities, but picking things that really resonate with you, whether it's a hobby or interests, will help bridge that gap when there's the bumpy times because there's a drive to connect with others that want or like the same things as you or just want to rely on each other. I just firmly believe that if you put yourself out there, you're going to find even just one person that's that person that you're supposed to find. That's I'm trying to trust in that, and I've been lucky enough to be able to see it happen for me. And I really wanted it, and that was my biggest hope was just one person.
Oh, that's lovely. I want that for so many people, and I'm so glad that you were able to find that. Aimee, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so much fun, and thanks for just sharing all of your experiences with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
To all of you who are listening, thank you for listening, for tuning in. If you have questions, comments, please leave them. We'd love to hear what you thought about this conversation. We'd love to hear what questions you might have for Aimee or other things that are on your mind. And otherwise, we will see you next time.